I never imagined a routine trip to the mall could turn into a nightmarish ordeal that I'd struggled to forget. It was a chilly evening in November. The mall was buzzing with pre-holiday energy, decorations adorning every corner. I was there to pick up a gift for my younger sister's birthday. It was already dark outside, and the mall was about to close in an hour. I hurried to the electronics store, made my purchase, and decided to leave. As I was walking towards the exit, a strange, uneasy feeling crept over me. The once crowded corridors were now eerily quiet. I picked up my pace, but something didn't feel right. The lights started flickering, casting long, ominous shadows. My heart raced. I thought it was just a technical glitch, but then I heard it. A faint whisper, like someone calling my name from a distance. I stopped, looking around. There was no one in sight. I convinced myself it was my imagination and continued walking. But the whispers grew louder, now joined by faint footsteps behind me. Every time I turned around, there was nothing but the empty hallway. Panic set in. I started to run, my footsteps echoing through the deserted mall. The whispers turned into an incoherent murmur, and the footsteps grew more rapid, as if whatever was behind me was gaining on me. I reached the main atrium, but to my horror, all the exits were inexplicably locked. I was trapped. Frantically searching for an escape, I remembered the service corridors and maintenance doors. I darted toward them, hoping to find a way out. The mall's atmosphere had turned sinister. The cheerful decorations now seemed mocking in the dim, flickering lights. Reaching the service door, I pushed it open. It led to a dimly lit, narrow corridor. The air was cold and musty. I hesitated, but knew going back wasn't an option. As I ventured in, the door slammed shut behind me, plunging me into near darkness. My only guide was the weak emergency lights flickering overhead. The corridor felt endless, a labyrinth beneath the mall. I heard strange sounds, whispers turning into muffled cries, and something shuffling in the darkness. I kept moving, my heart pounding in my chest. I stumbled upon old abandoned sections of the mall places that time had forgotten, with dusty mannequins and broken displays. Then, something moved in the shadows. I froze, straining my eyes to see. A figure tall and thin stood at a distance, barely visible. It didn't move, just stood there, watching me. I couldn't make out its features, but I felt its gaze piercing through me. The air grew colder, and a sense of dread overwhelmed me. I turned and ran, not daring to look back. The corridor seemed to twist and turn, disorienting me. I was lost in this underground maze. The figure appeared again, always at a distance, always watching. Eventually, I stumbled into a maintenance room with a small window. It was my only chance. I broke the window and climbed out, cutting my hands in the process. The cold night air never felt so welcoming. I emerged on the other side of the mall, far from where I had entered. Looking back at the building, it seemed peaceful, just a normal mall. But I knew better. I knew something sinister lurked within its walls, something unexplainable. I never returned to that mall. The experience haunted me for months. I did some research later and found out that part of the mall was built over old, uncharted tunnels. No one knew their purpose or extent. That night at the mall, I came face to face with something beyond my understanding. Whether it was a ghost, a remnant of the past, or just my imagination, I'll never know. But the fear was real, and it changed me forever. It was a regular evening in November when I decided to visit the local mall for some late-night shopping. The place was usually bustling with people, but that night it was oddly quiet. I shrugged it off, thinking it was just one of those slow days. As I walked through the main entrance, a cold breeze brushed past me, sending a chill down my spine. The usually bright and welcoming lights of the mall were dimmer than usual, casting eerie shadows along the corridors. I shook off the unease and headed towards the electronics store. The store was empty except for a salesperson who seemed too engrossed in his phone to notice me. I browsed around, picking up a pair of headphones. When I approached the counter to pay, the salesperson finally looked up. His eyes were hollow, like he hadn't slept in days. He muttered the price, and I handed him the money without a word. As I left the store, I heard a faint whisper. It sounded like someone was calling my name, but when I turned around, there was no one there. I quickened my pace, eager to leave the unsettling atmosphere of the mall. I decided to take a shortcut through the less frequented part of the mall to get to the exit faster. This section was undergoing renovation, and the unfinished stores and hanging wires gave it an abandoned feel. That's when I heard the whispers again, clearer this time, as if someone was right behind me. I spun around, but again there was no one. Panic started to set in. I began to run, my footsteps echoing through the empty hallways. As I ran, I heard more whispers, and now, faint laughter. It was as if the mall itself was alive, watching me with unseen eyes. Then, out of nowhere, a figure appeared in front of me. It was a boy, no more than 10 years old. He was pale, with dark circles under his eyes, and he was staring at me with an intensity that made my blood run cold. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered, in a voice that seemed to come from another world. I asked him who he was and what he was doing there, but he just repeated those words, "You shouldn't be here," before vanishing as if he was never there. I finally reached the main exit, but it was locked. In a state of near hysteria, I banged on the doors, screaming for help. Just then, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned around, expecting the worst, but it was a security guard. He looked at me with a mix of concern and confusion. I frantically explained what happened, but he just shook his head. "This mall has been closed for hours," he said. "How did you get in?" He led me to another exit, and as we walked, he told me a story that sent shivers down my spine. Years ago, a young boy had gotten lost in the mall after hours. They found him days later in the section I had run through, lifeless and alone. Some say his spirit still wanders the mall, and on quiet nights, he can be seen and heard. As I stepped out into the cool night air, I looked back at the mall. For a moment, I thought I saw a shadowy figure standing at the window watching me. I shuddered and walked away, vowing never to return to that place again. The experience haunted me for weeks. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, and the boy's words echoed in my mind. "You shouldn't be here." It was a true mall horror story, one that I would never forget. It was a Friday evening, just a regular day in my life, or so I thought. I was 17, a high school junior, eagerly awaiting the weekend. My friends and I planned to hang out at the local mall, a typical teenage hangout spot. The mall was bustling as usual, with groups of people milling about, store windows glittering with the latest fashion, and the food court emitting tantalizing aromas. I split from my friends to grab a bite, agreeing to meet them later at the arcade. As I walked towards the food court, I couldn't help but notice how the crowd seemed denser than usual. I shrugged it off, attributing it to the weekend rush. After eating, I decided to take a shortcut through a less crowded section of the mall to reach the arcade faster. This part of the mall was older and less frequented, with a few closed stores and dimmer lighting. The atmosphere felt different here, quieter, almost eerie. I quickened my pace, eager to leave the unsettling quiet behind. As I walked, I heard a sound that made my heart skip a beat, a soft, muffled whimpering. It was coming from one of the closed stores. Curiosity overpowered my unease, and I moved closer to the source of the sound. The store, once a bookshop, had its windows covered in dusty newspapers, and the door was slightly ajar. "Hello?" I called out tentatively, pushing the door open. The store was shrouded in darkness, the only light coming from the flickering fluorescent bulbs in the ceiling. The whimpering grew louder, and I could now discern it as a child's crying. My phone's flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing a shocking scene. There, in the corner of the room, was a young boy, no more than 5 years old, tied up and gagged. His eyes were wide with fear, and tears streamed down his cheeks. I rushed over, my mind racing with questions. Who was he? How did he end up here? I quickly untied him and removed the gag. The boy was too scared to speak, just clung to me, trembling. I knew I had to get him out of there and find help. As we stepped out of the store, I heard a chilling sound, footsteps echoing in the deserted corridor. Someone was coming. My instincts screamed danger. I grabbed the boy's hand and ran, not looking back. The footsteps grew louder, closer. I could feel the presence of someone or something behind us. The mall, once a place of fun and laughter, now felt like a labyrinth of terror. We finally burst into the brightly lit part of the mall, panting and scared. People looked at us in surprise, but I didn't stop to explain. I headed straight to the security desk, the boy still clutching my hand tightly. The security guards were quick to respond. They called the police while one of them comforted the boy, trying to get information about his identity and how he ended up in such a horrifying situation. The police arrived swiftly, taking over the situation. They questioned me thoroughly, took the boy into their care, and began an investigation. It turned out the boy had been missing for 2 days, abducted from a nearby neighborhood. The store where I found him was supposed to be vacant, a perfect hiding spot for whoever had taken him. The police never found the person responsible, but the boy was safely reunited with his family. The mall increased its security, and the incident became a chilling reminder of the dangers lurking even in the most familiar places. For me, it was a life-changing experience. The mall, once a symbol of carefree youth, now held a shadow of fear and mystery. I became more cautious, more aware of my surroundings. But above all, I learned the value of trusting my instincts and the difference one person can make in the face of true horror.